The last time she was in custody, mugshot photos were in black and white.
One woman has remained a fugitive for decades, and while she runs from the law, one family is hoping you can bring them closer to justice. Jeremy Ross has tonight's Wisconsin's Most Wanted.
The film from 1968 shows glimpses of protest.
They were burning draft cards.
Demonstrations surrounding the war in Vietnam, and on November 21st of that year, President Lyndon Johnson was in the White House. And a Milwaukee trio was in custody. The newspaper called it a slaying. Then 18-year-old Melvitine Lampkins and two others played a part in a grocery store robbery. The article described gun whipping and shots fired. One man apparently did not move fast enough for the robbers.
Took a sawed-off shotgun and shot him in the chest.
Who shoots a 78-year-old man in a grocery store?
It was point-blank range. He put the shotgun right to his chest and pulled the trigger.
78-year-old John Adornato was shopping with his wife.
He was a gentle soul. He was a lover of people.
He was rushed from the area of Buffalo Center to a hospital. The intern at the emergency room knew there was nothing he could do, and that intern just happened to be one of Adornato's 11 grandchildren.
It took us by such shock.
Another of his grandchildren, Celia Dodge, describes the impact of the murder.
It devastated them. It really did. It broke the family apart.
The robbers were caught and convicted of the crime, including Melvitine Lampkins.
She was the lookout for the robbery.
Michelle Herrings of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force says Lampkins was sentenced to life in prison plus 60 years, but was given the chance to attend school during that time. Lampkins took advantage of the opportunity, and Herrings says she escaped in 1976 and somehow managed to escape again in 1979.
Her whereabouts and activities have been unknown since.
How could someone be missing out of a jail cell, out of a prison for 30 years?
Yes, I think they deserve an explanation.
I'd like to point a finger. I wouldn't know where to start.
Lampkins has roots in Milwaukee and Madison, and at the age of 62, she's managed to avoid law enforcement spotlight. But for how long?
She will have to pay for what she did.
A crime taking place during a time of unrest and conflict. The fugitive bringing additional unrest to a family decades later.
I don't feel vindictive, but I do feel she needs to be found.
He is not called a scientist, but he had some of the tools of the trade.
Specimen jars, petri dishes.
Back in 2005, law enforcement says 64-year-old Denise Hughes was trying to use those containers to manufacture something malicious.
The biological agent ricin.
That's a toxin originating from castor beans. When broken down and refined, it can prove deadly.
Ricin is right up there with anthrax or mustard gas.
If inhaled, it poisons its victims on a cellular level, meaning death could occur from the inside out.
How he was going to use that biological agent at this point to us is unknown.
Deputy U.S. Marshal Jeremy Lesh says Hughes' home in Vilas County turned out to be a makeshift laboratory, and other finds followed.
They also came up with approximately 100 different firearms that were, in a sense, sealed inside the walls of his home.
Why would someone need 100 firearms?
Well, Mr. Hughes is a self-described militia member or survivalist.
Marshals say the discovery began with a traffic stop and a car search. What law enforcement found underneath a blanket inside led to more searches and Hughes' prosecution.
They found bomb-making materials, books about bomb making, nitrate fertilizer, sulfur are the precursors for a biological agent.
He served his time and on May 25th was supposed to report to a halfway house in Milwaukee.
He never arrived.
Lesh believes Hughes could be somewhere in rural northern Wisconsin or in the southeastern part of the state.
He also has family here in Waukesha, and then he has additional family in Arizona.
A man tied to a sinister kind of science. A fugitive marshals want bottled up.
It's gonna be a corner house.
After gearing up back in May, U.S. Marshals made some house calls.
Who is it?
They searched and found fugitives, as well as some unexpected surprises, including one fugitive cold case.
Oh, my Lord.
Barbara Bruneau should be living out her golden years at the age of 69, but instead, she's living on the run.
She has quite a history that dates back quite a long time.
On November 2nd, 1974, investigators were called to a home off of 24th Place and Hope Avenue.
It started with a landlord observing what he believed to be blood in the back stairwell.
Police would find more blood and eventually locate the body of James Hampton in a storage area. He was shot and killed by a then 32-year-old Bruneau.
Miss Bruneau was already on probation and parole in the early 70s.
Deputy U.S. Marshal Jeremy Lesh says even before the murder, Bruneau was convicted of burglary and arson. Court documents show the fugitive warned another woman she would burn her house down. The threat became reality. 3 separate fires were set, causing $3,000 damage to the building. But if you fast forward to 1992,
She got out of prison.
not long after, Bruneau would cut out on her parole.
16 years she's had a warrant. 16 years she's most likely been hiding in plain sight.
This past summer, law enforcement's search for the senior led them to a quiet North Side neighborhood.
We believe she is in the Milwaukee area.
But they failed to find their fugitive. Now marshals hope with your help, justice can be served even more than a decade later.
She needs to go back to serve the time that she's earned.
Several of the sounds in a Kenosha neighborhood became muted.
She had trouble hearing a little bit after that.
The frequency and amplitude of noise maliciously muffled for one victim.
Apparently I had blood coming out my ears.
She thought she had a perforated eardrum.
This woman asked we not show her face on camera. She says she was beaten September 12th by 32-year-old Jamil Garrett, a man she called her ex-boyfriend and the father of her child.
Without a weapon being involved, basically, it's one of the worst ones we've had.
Detective John Peterson of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force says Garrett was serving time in the county jail for a separate attack and only 2 days after getting out, headed to his ex-girlfriend's place. She moved on. Garrett did not.
Just repeatedly kept banging on her head.
My whole face was hurting.
Threw her against the dresser.
I think he knocked me unconscious the first or second hit because I didn't wake up.
When the victim regained consciousness, she found herself in the hospital and in bad shape.
My mom said she couldn't even recognize me.
Garrett's been on the run ever since, but there are some markings that follow him.
He has a tattoo, it looks like, on the inside of each forearm. His left forearm looks like there's flames of some sort.
On his right forearm is an image of a skull in a top hat. Despite evading law enforcement's reach, he's reached out to his ex-girlfriend.
He was calling my work phone.
The victim says Garrett placed call after call, telling her not to go to the police, with threats including
People are coming after us. People are going to kill us.
a man accused of beating a woman so bad she lost some of her hearing.
I want him in jail. I want him in jail.
The next noises law enforcement hopes to hear is the sound of Garrett in custody.
What he did was wrong, and I think he deserves to be in jail.
With squad cars parked and police tape wrapped around a South Side neighborhood, investigators searched for a murderer as loved ones searched for any comfort in a time of crisis.
I got there and I saw the puddle of blood, and I just assumed the worst.
This woman asked we not show her face on camera. She's a family member of 24-year-old Diana Garcia's.
And I think about it every day.
Garcia was married to 29-year-old Jose Luis Descua Betos. They began raising a son together, but their relationship became strained.
The bickering, the fighting, the controlling.
Garcia was ready to move on. Descua was not. The morning of January 3rd, past domestic violence turned into present danger.
When she screamed, "Luis, no," that's when he hit her with the 2x4.
He brutally attacked her at that time in front of witnesses.
He continued to hit her with the 2x4 until it broke into 3 pieces.
Later armed himself with a knife and continued attacking her.
The medical examiner's office said she suffered approximately 12 stab wounds.
Didn't want to believe that happened to her. It was just a lot to take in.
I think it takes a lot of rage.
It's one of the most brutal crimes Milwaukee police detective
Probably one of the worst.
Steve Caballero has ever worked on.
Probably one of the worst.
Discua should have never been near the crime scene. Family members say he was deported back in 2009 because of prior domestic violence. Caballero believes the fugitive may still be in Milwaukee, hiding out somewhere on the south side using an alias, possibly working at a temporary job.
He threatened to kill me and my mother, and who knows if he'll come back and try to kill us.
A man police say left a bloody crime scene and left a family in a state of grief and fear.
Obviously, if he hurt the mother of his child, he would hurt anyone else.
Jeremy Ross, Fox 6 News.